Hello listeners, Vincenzo here telling you that I am back with my audio narration of Goal Glory Days. And after logging back in and seeing a comment to please continue, I decided to pursue this objective of completing this book very soon and also to venture into more narration of other books in the near future. So feel free to shoot me any suggestions in the comments. Anyway, it's been a while since I was doing this book, so forgive me if my voice has changed or if some of the character voices sound a bit different now. Stay tuned to more work. I will put more information in the description of these videos, but most important of all, enjoy listening. Thank you so much. Chapter 6. Roz was careful to stick to the speed limits as she drove from one side of the city to the other. She was always a cautious driver, but even more so when she had little Rosie strapped into the car seat in the rear of the Volkswagen. She was in a hurry, but that didn't mean she was going to put Rosie or herself in any danger. Santi was off with the team on an away match, and Roz had received a text message from Enrique saying he'd forgotten his house key. He was waiting outside, and it was raining hard. "If he's got any sense, he'll wait in the outhouse in the garden," said Roz to herself more than to Rosie, who wasn't listening anyway but staring out at the rain and the passing traffic. Roz was glad to be back at work, back on the wards, doing something really useful. She didn't go into nursing to get rich, that didn't happen, but being married to a top Premiership soccer player made it possible to live a very rich lifestyle, so it felt more important than ever to do something worthwhile with her life. And it was going well. Ross's bosses were doing everything they could to help make her return as smooth as possible. The job was 4 days a week, and part of the back-to-work package was that it was mainly day shifts with only occasional nights, which helped a lot. But even on day shifts, nursing isn't a 9-to-5 job, and there were often emergency situations to be dealt with, meaning that Roz frequently had to call Lorraine to let her know she was going to be late picking up Rosie. Today was one of those days. Roz had only just collected Rosie and was trying to get home quickly, but it was rush hour. The city roads were jam-packed and the rain was delaying progress even more. Roz joined a line of cars moving slowly around a busy traffic circle and smiled as she heard Rosie start to sing a song she picked up from the radio. The car finally reached the front of the line and Roz wiped a hand across her side window, which was steaming up slightly. There was a gap in the approaching traffic and Roz pulled out. Suddenly, a car came hurtling out of nowhere going much too fast. Roz instinctively stepped on the brakes. There was a screech of more brakes and then a thud as the vehicle behind her crunched into Roz. Enrique wasn't in the garden outhouse. He'd found the side door of the large double garage unlocked and was in there, juggling a soccer ball. He was good at it, both feet, his head, even his shoulders. He could hold the ball on an instep and then flick it up and make it come to the rest on the back of his neck between his shoulders, just like some of the great ball players he'd seen at the Bernabeu. But even juggling gets boring after a while. He flicked the ball upward and as it came down he hit a perfect half volley that clanged into the garage doors and bounced away. Enrique sighed. He was missing home, his parents, his friends, Madrid. Santi and Roz were nice enough and good to him, but they were both busy and rarely had much time to talk. The academy was going well, or at least Enrique thought it was. The coaches had been very enthusiastic about his attitude and his progress. The other bonus was that little Rosie, she'd taken a real shine to Enrique, whom she called Rique. And surprisingly, Rique felt the same way about Rosie. She was a delightful little kid, and although Enrique was technically her uncle, he felt she was more like the little sister he never had. Life in England was good, as his mother had said it would be, except for one thing: school. It wasn't the lessons or the change from learning in Spanish to English. That was difficult, but Enrique's English was good and getting better all the time. It wasn't the teachers. Most were great, as were the majority of other kids. After all, it was no longer unusual for kids from other European countries to be at British schools, and Enrique was by no means the only newcomer to England in his class. The problem was very specific. 3 boys of Enrique's age had decided they didn't like him and were ganging up to make his school life as miserable as they could. Enrique went to open the side door. leaned against the frame and stared out at the rain, deciding that it was probably his own fault. He'd gone into the school trying to impress at first, boasting about how he was at the academy and that his big brother was the famous Santiago Muñez. He hadn't meant to do it, it had just been nerves, but once he started boasting, it was almost as though he couldn't stop, for a few days at least. He'd bragged about how he'd run wild in Madrid and even about hot-wiring his brother's Lamborghini sports car and driving away from a nightclub when Santi was inside. He didn't tell them, though, that he'd crashed the car and ended up in the hospital. He just wanted to sound big, important, and by the time he realized he was getting it completely wrong, it was too late. The ringleader, Jake Hodge, and his two mates, Jordan Cole and Craig Cameron, were on his case. Big time. And Enrique had been bullied before, in Spain. He knew the signs, and he knew he could be in it for a rough time. Enrique sighed. Stupido. Then he heard a car. It didn't sound like Roz's Volkswagen. This vehicle arrived with a throaty growl, sounding more like a sports car of some kind. He ran around to the front of the garage and saw that it was, after all, Roz's car. She had driven it close to the house, and Enrique spotted instantly what was causing the noise. The exhaust pipe was hanging loose, and the back bumper and hatchback door were badly dented. Roz switched off the engine and got out just as Enrique approached. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, as if worried that Enrique was going to launch into a complaint about waiting out in the rain for so long. But he didn't. "For what?" he said. For getting back so late." Enrique shrugged. "It doesn't matter. Are you okay?" He looked pointedly at the car. "Yeah," said Roz, nodding gratefully. "It looks worse than it is, really, but it was a shock. And Rosie, is she... Enrique!" Enrique looked into the rear of the vehicle and saw Rosie in her seat with both arms stretched out toward him. He smiled, opened the car door, and released her from the safety seat. He lifted Rosie from the vehicle, and she clung to him with both arms around his neck. "Let's get inside," said Roz. "It's been quite a day." They walked toward the front door, and Roz fished her keys from her bag. "Have you told Santi about the accident yet?" asked Enrique as they reached the door. Roz shook her head. "Not yet. I don't want to worry him before a game, and it was only a bit of a crash after all. I'll tell him later, after the match." She slid her key into the lock. "Anyway, how was your day? Apart from losing your door key, that is." Enrique smiled. "Good. Really good." End of chapter 6.